Welcome back, everybody. It's so nice to see everybody returning after that session. I'm just going to throw into a chat box, actually, a quick article that I dug up, which might help some of you feel a little more powerful when you're networking. Dr. Kashiara talked about how feeling like you have power in a situation might reduce the yuckiness, if you feel like you can give something. And so there's an article with 17 reasons fresh graduates like yourself are amazing. And hopefully you'll feel like some of those are also true for you. At this point, I'm very excited to pass the metaphorical baton over to Derek Smith. He's a career strategist here at the Academic Advising and Career Center. He put it in his bio, so I think he's okay saying for 17 years, he's been helping job seekers get ready for the labor market and reach their professional goals. Derek is very comfortable with online stuff, doing online counseling and online tutorials and webinars long before the COVID pushed us all into doing it. And he's known as a storyteller. So one of his strategies is to help others see their stories and share their stories with potential employers. And of course, resumes are one way that we share our stories. So thanks so much, Derek. The floor is yours.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Jen. I appreciate that. Good morning, everyone. Again, as Jen said, my name is Derek Smith, and I'm a career strategist with the Academic Advising and Career Center. And today, I'm talking to you about resumes. Now, before I jump into all of my presentation, please remember that this has closed captioning available as well. So once again, here's the instructions, how you can activate the closed captioning on your CC button there on your Zoom. So let's jump into this a little bit. What you're going to need today are a couple of different handouts that you will find in your package. So the first handout you will need is the job posting T-analysis handout. So it looks like this. You do have it in the package that's been sent to you. So you need to find that. We don't need it for a few moments, but you'll need that. And you're also going to need the 3 job postings. So you're given 3 job postings, and you will find them again in that package. We'll be doing a breakout room later on in the session. So please go ahead, make sure you got those available to you somewhere on your desktop or on your computer somewhere, and I'll let you know when we'll be using those. Again, you do need the T-analysis handout, and you will also need the job postings as well. Now, with the presentation today, we're going to talk a lot about resumes and what they're all about. Now, when it comes to the information I'm sharing with you today, I'm going to let you know that this is probably one of our more dense presentations in the sense of information. So I do want to apologize beforehand. Over the next 90 minutes, I am covering a lot of information with you, but you will be getting some resources at the end of this, just in case you need to remember some of that as well. Now, when it comes to the chats as well, we're going to be doing some breakout room sessions, and I'll also do some chat activities with you. But in the sense of questions, I'll let you know this. Resumes is probably one of our most talked about services we do here. And there's so many different perceptions and questions about resumes that I won't be able to answer all those throughout the chat, throughout the process here. As I said, I got a lot of information to share. So I'm going to ask you to save your individual questions about resumes to the end of the presentation. That way I can get through all the information with you, and with the time we have left over, we'll see what questions there are. Because I just want to get through all the material with you first. And there's so many individual questions, individual case-by-case questions when it comes to resumes that if I sat there and answered everybody's question, unfortunately, I'd never get done until well into later today. So let's focus on the presentation itself. So what are the learning outcomes for today as well? Recognize that resumes are an important part of the self-marketing document tool. I'll explain more of that in a second. Recall the importance of analyzing the job postings and researching the company and the industry as part of your resume. Identifying the different components of a resume, recognizing creating a strong accomplishment statement, and understanding the formatting of the resume. So I'll be covering all that with you today. But before I get into all that, let's ask a question. And what is the point of a resume? By far, resumes are our most requested services by students. Now, just to let you all know, and I'll repeat this at the end, is we do provide one-to-one consultations for all students. So everybody listening to me right now can have a one-to-one meeting with us about their resumes, their cover letters, which I'll talk later on today, LinkedIn, job search, grad school questions, the career exploration components we spoke about yesterday. We do offer one-to-one sessions. So you can actually book an appointment with us through the ANCC and get your resume done. And it is by far the most requested service that we have. Now, I don't have my COVID numbers, but I would say before COVID, when I was meeting students beforehand, I was probably doing 150-ish resumes a year. I'd say somewhere around that number. Hard to say, but I was doing quite a lot of them. So what is the point of them anyway? Well, we have to understand that they are a marketing tool. It is something that you use to share your story. Now, to truly understand what the purpose of the resume is, I want you to start to rethink how you create your resume, but not only that, what the purpose of it is. And to help understand that, we need to think about the retail market for a second. So I don't know about you, but for myself, especially since COVID, almost every single company that I've shopped from online since COVID started sends me probably 1 to 2 emails a day about a special offer they're having. I don't know about you, but it drives me a little nuts, right? I shop at a place online, then all of a sudden I get email after email after email from them. Buy from us. We have a sale going on. We have clearance. You could probably relate to this about the amount of emails you get. Now, before COVID even, when you're shopping, for example, think about it when you were in a mall. Again, what's a mall, right? But remember before COVID, just walking around the stores and how all those stores tried to grab your attention. What's the purpose of retail marketing? Retailers know this, that if you go shopping for something and if you can't find what you're looking for at a certain store, so let's say you go to store A and you're looking for an item. If that store doesn't carry that item, or if you don't like their price, or let's say it's online delivery and it's for another 2 months, you won't be getting this, what are you going to do? I don't know about you, but I go to the next place, right? And if that next place doesn't have what I'm looking for, what do? You go to the next place. That is the nature of retail, whether you did it in person or online. If you can't find what you're looking for, the price or whatever the service at a certain location, you just go find it somewhere else. And this is the challenge that retail marketers have, in that they know this is what happens. So their goal is to get you to pause and stop and look at them for a few more moments. Out of all those emails that I get every day from all those places I've been shopping at, if one of them catches my eye and I go, ooh, what is that? And I happen to click on it, the retail marketer is like, yes, because they realize that as soon as I go to their website, I have a higher chance of shopping from them compared to just deleting their email. When it comes to you and your resume, you need to start thinking like a retail marketer. What you need to do is start to understand that when it comes to your resume, you're the retail marketer. You're the one who's trying to go to the employer, and the employer in this case is the consumer, and you're trying to get their attention. You're trying to, just for a few moments, for them to say, ooh, what is that? And have them take a look at your resume for a few seconds longer compared to someone else's. Because you have to understand something when it comes to you, your job search, and your resume, that there are 2 big problems you're going to be facing. This comes from any form of job search, but especially yesterday when Elin was speaking about that online job searching, and a lot of this I'll be talking about is from that online job searching. What you have to understand is this. Problem number 1 you're going to face in your job search is that you're not the only candidate. Now you might say, yeah, I know other people will be applying for the job. No, you don't understand the amount of people that apply for that position. Let's say you do find a job on Indeed. It matches, it looks good. You do have to realize that there may be dozens, there might be hundreds, or in some cases, thousands of other people applying for the exact same position you just found. So step 1 in how to understand how to overcome problem number 1 is to understand the 2 biggest mistakes you can make on your resume. Now, let's do this in the chat a little bit. So here we're going to do a bit of a chat discussion. Throw in the chat, what do you think are the 2 biggest mistakes you can make on your resume? Take a guess. There's 2 of them. Anybody want to have a shot? Throw in the chats. Spelling, we got some spelling, a lot of information, too long, not personalizing it, we'll get to that, too lengthy, being too vague. These are all good answers. Not providing enough contact information, too general, typos. Be lying. Don't ever lie on your resume. If you ever fib on your resume or an exaggeration and they find out later, that's grounds for termination. Do not exaggerate or lie. But these are all good answers. So let's talk about them. Problem, or I should say mistake number 1 that people make on the resume, and this is the most common mistake people make on their resume, is using the same generic resume for most job applications. This is probably the biggest one. Whenever a student comes to me and they say, I sent out 100 resumes, I've sent out 200 resumes, and trust me, I do hear this. I'll usually ask them, well, are you using the same resume for every job application? And they'll say, well, yeah, pretty much. Is that a problem? And I'll say, well, how many applications did you send out without a phone call? So the problem is you can't use generic resumes. There's no such thing as a one-size-fits-all resume in today's labor market. So that's mistake number one. And I'll go into a little bit more detail about that in a second. The second biggest mistake you can make is not truly understanding the position you're applying to. As I mentioned, one of the services we provide is resume critiquing, and we often encourage you to send in your job posting you want to apply to. In fact, just this week alone, I was doing a resume review with a student who sent me a job posting. And when I went through the job posting with them and actually read it with them, they actually said to me during our appointment, now that I know what the job's about, do you think I should still apply to this job? They didn't know what they were actually applying to. And this is something we see with students that's very common, is not knowing the actual positions they're applying to. So let's go into a little bit more detail about that. We need to understand how an online resume is processed. Now, we talked a little bit about this yesterday, but I want to go into a little bit more detail with you right now. So let's look at how a typical online resume is processed, and you'll see why these are the two biggest mistakes when it comes to your resume. So how is a typical resume process? Now, the ATS, we heard about this yesterday. So that ATS stands for Applicant Tracking System. So as I mentioned, there could literally be hundreds of other candidates who apply for a job. And the problem the employer faces is that there is no way they can read all those resumes that come in. It is not both physically or financially possible to hire enough people to read 500 resumes. They're not going to do it. So they employ this ATS computer scanning system. So if you've ever applied to a job and you've uploaded it online, you've been scanned. The ATS is a scanning computer system. And the way it basically works is it uses keyword algorithms. So here's problem number one I spoke about. You're not the only candidate, okay? So the ATS is deleting people. Now, how many people does it delete? It depends how it's set up, but the research I've done is it can delete up to 70 to 80% of candidates. Again, I'll repeat that. It can, depending on how it's programmed, delete up to 70 to 80% of people that apply for a job. Now, you might say to yourself, that is a lot of people being deleted from a position. Yes, it is, until you do the math. Let's say you have around 400 people apply for a job, which in today's labor market, especially through a job on Indeed or LinkedIn or whatever job board you're using, deleting up to 70% of those people still will leave you with about 70 people you got to read by hand. So that's still quite a lot of people you have to read by hand. So the ATS's single, first of all, purpose is to just remove the bulk of candidates. So the question is how does it work? Well, it uses that keyword algorithm. So the way the keyword algorithm works is the job posting has certain keywords in it. And we'll look at a job posting in a few slides. And the recruiters program that system to look for resumes that have those key terminologies. If your resume does not contain those key terminologies, goodbye. Just like that. Not seen by anybody, deleted into cyber oblivion. So this is why mistake number two of not understanding the job ad is something that you don't want to be doing, because if you don't understand the job ad, if you're not reading the job ad, what happens is you don't know the keywords. You don't know what they're looking for, and you don't include them on your resume. You're part of that 70, 80%, and bye-bye you go. So the ATS system is there. How do you match the keywords? We're going to look at those in a few moments, how to do that. So if you don't have the keywords, if you're not customizing it, if you're using that one-size-fits-all resume, you're not even making it through the system. And you're actually making their life easier because they don't have to read your resume. Now, not all companies use an ATS. They all can't afford them. But a well-trained recruiter operates much like an ATS system. Because now we need to talk about the human resources person. So even if a company doesn't have an ATS system, your frontline screener is a person. Now, some of my personal background is I used to do recruitment on a contract level. I used to do contract recruitment for a company that I knew. So I was the ATS system. They didn't have one, so I operated as one in which I was screening out resumes for different positions. According to current statistics, the average recruiter can read your whole resume and decide if you're a good fit within 5 to 10 seconds. Again, I'll repeat that. The average good recruiter will screen out a resume in 5 to 10 seconds during the initial screening. Now, when we get down to the smaller amount of resumes, that we would take more time. But I was trained when I did my recruitment job to delete resumes or put them in the yes or no pile in less than 5 seconds. Here's my training. So my training was done online of how to be able to do this. What my training was is they would, on a computer program, they would pop up a job posting. I had 2 minutes to read the job posting and learn it. So I would read it for 2 minutes. Then the computer program would pop up 5 different resumes, not at once, one after the other. So it would pop up 5 different resumes and give me 6 seconds to take a look at them. So resume number 1 would pop up. I'd have 6 seconds to take a look at it. Then the computer took it away. Resume number 2, 6 seconds, took it away, so on and so forth. I had to, out of those 5 resumes, pick the top 2 that were the best fit for that job. I had to continue my training until I reached an 80% or above success rate of picking the best 2 resumes. So that was my training. So before COVID, when students would meet with me, if they were to sit down with me and give me the resume, I would literally look down. You'd see my finger go da-da-da-da-da, give the resume back and say, okay, here's where you need to fix it. Like, you read that already? I'm like, yeah, I did. It's because I was trained to do it. Your average recruiter can do that. Now you might think, oh my gosh, I spent hours on this thing. Why are they going through so fast? Well, you have to imagine the recruiter point of view. When I was doing this, I had this on my desk. You know what this was? This was a stack of resumes I had to get through. 100, 150, 200, 250. I just had to go through them. And they didn't want me to spend hours and hours through that pile. So it was yes or no, yes or no, yes or no. We're starting to understand why if you use the same resume for every position, and if you don't know the job you're applying to, how on one of these 2 levels, the ATS or the human resources screener, you'll get put out. Then after all that, we get to the hiring person. So it's quite the filter that you have to go through to get there. And what that means is when it comes to your resume, you really need to start thinking like that marketer does, that retail marketer. What are you going to do to be able to be that person that within that 5 seconds get picked and say yes? What are you going to do when you go through that screening system? The system says this person matches enough criteria, send to the hiring manager for the yes. But I want to spend some time on this because you have to understand what the process is like. And this is not meant to discourage you. It's meant to get you to think differently and how you're going to approach things from this point forward. Sending out 100 to 200 resumes and not hearing a phone call, in my personal opinion, is a bit of a waste of time. It is better to create a higher quality resume, send out less of them, and get more phone calls. So let's take a look at that. So problem number 1 was you're not the only candidate. And that was that whole section, is just getting to the human resources person. But the second problem you're going to be facing is this. You're not the only one who can do the job. Let's look at this scenario. Let's say only 100 applicants apply for a job, which in today's labor market is really, really small of applicant pools. But let's say only 100 people apply for a job. That ATS does its job. It deletes 80% of them. So 80 are gone. That leaves 20 people remaining. So there's 20 physical resumes that will be looked at by the hiring manager. In that pile, you are number 13. So you're part of that 20, but you're number 13. Out of those 20, and we saw this from Lynn's statistics yesterday, about 5 will get an interview, which means 5 will get phone calls, 15 get nothing. You're number 13 out of 20, and the big question is, why call you? What you have to understand is when you get down to that final remainder of the 20 or the 10 or whatever it is before they make the phone calls, is those resumes are going to start to look pretty similar at that point. You have enough of the initial qualifications and experiences that they're looking for. But because you're not the only candidate, so does everybody else. Now, I've actually experienced this before. So way before I worked at U of T, I used to work at another university. And before I worked at that other university, I was working at a not-for-profit employment agency. And this university's job ad came up online. So I decided to apply for it. It was in their career center. One of my colleagues who had the exact same job title as me also applied for the job. Now, I knew they applied for the job. They didn't know I applied for the job. But let's understand this. Both myself and my colleague had the exact same job title. We both had very similar experiences and both had very similar education. We both applied for the same job, and this 100% actually happened. I got a phone call for an interview. They did not. Same job title, same company, similar education, similar experience. I got a phone call. They did not. Now, why was that? I'll get into a few more minutes of what my resume was different compared to theirs. But whenever you're applying to a job, this is a mindset you need to get into. Now, in my case, I was going up against a fellow colleague, but in your particular case, I always say this to students. Imagine when you're applying to that job that your fellow classmate, someone you sat with every single day, has also applied for the exact same position, because they probably have. They have the same access to Indeed, LinkedIn, whatever job board you're using. You're in the same classes. You might be going after similar positions. There's a high probability that the same job you just had applied to, a fellow classmate also had applied as well. So this is where your mindset has to change. Start thinking, is what makes me different from them? What are the extra things I need to start thinking about that when I'm put side by side to someone I went to school with, the employer is going to say yes to myself? So let's start taking a closer look at that. What we need to start doing when it comes to your resume is actually start taking a moment and step back. Before we actually think about formatting, before we start thinking about 1 to 2 pages or all that other stuff, which I will be covering, we need to start doing some preparation work first. And there are 3 specific areas we need to start looking at when it comes to how to put together your resume. And we're talking just this is the research side. This is the preparation side. You need to start looking at what are called your unique selling points. That's what the USB stands for. Start thinking about your unique selling points and how that matches to the employer. The first step when it comes to any job application is you need to understand bullet number 1. What skills, experience, qualifications, and/or attributes is the employer looking for? Step 1 is what is the job actually about them applying to? Taking the time to actually understand the position. What are they looking for? What are the skills, the experiences? What kind of personality traits does this employer want? Now, we heard this in our keynote speaker's message yesterday when she talked about job postings a little bit, understanding the job. Andy Lynn spoke about this too. Understand the employer first. Understand the job posting first. That's step 1. Step 2, now that we understand what the employer is looking for, what do we have? What do we have that matches for what they're asking for? What do we have that they would like to see? Whenever I do a resume critique with a job posting, the first thing I do actually is not look at your resume. The first thing I do is look at the job posting. I don't want to look at the resume first. I want to look at the job posting first, because I want to look at the job posting and get into the brain of the recruiter. I want to understand the job. I want to understand what they're looking for. I want to understand who this position is about, what it is about. Once I get into the brain of the recruiter, then I look at your resume so that I can see how you match up. So understand the employer and job posting first. Then the next step is, well, what do you have? What do you have that matches up? And the third part is, how do you tell it to them? So these 3 components, what is the job about, what do you have, and how do you tell about them to them, is what the remainder of our time together will be about. So let's talk about the employer first. And when it comes down to understanding how to apply to a job, your best friend is the word research. Take the time to do some research. Now that you're a graduating student and trying to go into the quote unquote real world, you do have to understand that competition is going to be harder, that there is more people you're going up against. You might be going up against someone who's got a couple years of experience. So you need to take the time to do your research first to make sure you're really putting out a quality product to the employer. So research that industry, what's happening in the field, what trends are occurring, especially now in COVID. Take some time to understand, okay, here's how they're hiring, here's the kind of jobs they're looking for. The organization, this is something that a lot of people don't even bother looking at, is the organization. We'll take the time to know them. What are they about? This is actually something, when I talk about cover letters later on today, that you can talk about in your cover letter, is why that company. But you need to know, why do you want to work for them? And then finally, the position. This is the important part. Understand what the job is itself. I just met with a student this week who understood part 1 and part 2. So they understood the industry. They had a great passion for the industry they wanted to work in. The organization, they really wanted to work at that organization. So I could clearly see that. But when I looked at their resume and cover letter, they didn't understand the position. because they really wanted to work for that company. They really did. They had a high passion for it, I could tell. But when I started looking at their resume, it didn't match the job posting. And when I read the posting to them, they were like, oh, is that what the job's really about? So they have number 1 and number 2, but not number 3. Once you understand the organization, then we understand yourself. We need to understand the skills that you're going to be bringing that the company is looking for. So there's 3 types of skills we have here. We have our technical skills. So some companies, for example, those of you who are comp sci students, those of you who are into any of the kind of sciences, you know that you have a lot of technical skills you have to know. But even some of our business students, for example, right? You might need to know VLOOKUP, the Excel. So understand the technical skills they want first, and then understand the skills that you have that they're looking for. Then look at your other skills that you have, such as transferable skills, skills that you develop that may have some kind of connection to the job. May not be a direct fit, but it can be a fit if developed. That's your transferable skills. And then what personal skills do you have? Some jobs have various different personal skills that they're looking for. So what kind of skills do you have that they're looking for? Then what you want to do is bring the 2 of them together. So what we're going to look at is what is known as a T analysis, okay? So I'm going to show you what that is in a second. But basically what a T analysis is on one side, you're going to look at the job ad requirements, technical, soft skills, educational skills. You're going to look at the organizational and characteristic fit of the company, and think about specific questions, organizational specific questions, and career-related questions. Like think the details about the organization. Take your time. So here is an actual job posting, okay? Here is a job posting. This is an actual real-life job posting that I pulled off CLN. And if I were meeting with a student physically, I would do the following. They'd give me the job posting, and I would mark it up. Did you see what I did there? Let me back it up. So here's the job posting by itself. And the next slide is all the key terminologies highlighted. When I would meet with students physically, I would actually take a pen or a highlighter and literally start marking up all those key words. Someone asked before, how do I know what the key words are? This is what you do. You start going through the entire job posting and marking up all the key terminologies. But we have to be careful when it comes to something in job postings. There are 2 big mistakes an individual can make when it comes to reading a job ad. What are those 2 big mistakes a person can do? Mistake number 1 is relying on the job title by itself. What do I mean by that? You have to understand that job titles are arbitrary. Companies can call a job whatever they want. I one time was meeting with a human resources student who brought me 3 job postings. Now, just to let you know, we typically don't do 3 job postings during sessions, but I thought, okay, you brought 3, I'll take a look at them. So I looked at the 3 job postings, and all 3 job postings said human resources specialist. Again, I repeat that. All 3 job postings said human resources specialist, but all 3 were from different companies. And when I read the jobs over, they were actually different jobs. So we have to understand is that job titles are a guide, not a rule. Job titles are a guide, not a rule. Let's take some very, let's say, open job titles such as researcher. What is a researcher? I know many of you are thinking you want to go into research, which is great. You might put in that into Indeed as your key terminology to look up things as researcher. But what we have to understand is what industries do research? What programs at UTSC do research? Well, some of you are like, well, I'm a bio student, so I do research in the lab. Okay, that's a form of research. But some of you are psychology students. Do psychology students do research? Well, yes, they do. But is it the same research that a bio student would do? No, it's a different type of research. But what about English students? Do they do research? Well, actually, yes, they do. They do literary research. What about history? Do they do research as well? Actually, they do. Yes, they do that. What about a finance student? Do they do research? Well, actually, they do as well. You see the problem I'm talking about? Is that you just can't rely just on that keyword for the job title because it could mean so many different things. So mistake number 1 is just simply relying on the job title. Number 2, the second mistake you can make is hopping straight down to the qualifications and hitting the apply button. If you go straight down to the qualifications and hit the apply button, that's the second mistake. Why is it that mistake? Just hopping down right to the qualifications and hitting the apply button? Because all job postings, whether they're that psychology researcher, that biology researcher, that English researcher, all of them want great communication skills, team player skills. They all want you to be analytical. They all want you to know Microsoft Office. You see the problem coming up with is that about 80% of job postings, regardless of industries, ask for the same things. Now there'll be that 20%, which will be individual to the job, but most job postings just ask for the same things. Oh, they want some kind of bachelor's degree. I got that. 1 to 2 years of experience. I got that. Communication skills. I got that. And analytical, hit the apply button. Don't even know what the job posting is. The way you read a job posting is starting from the very top, read the entire thing. Read what the, not only what the qualifications are, but the job description. What are you doing day in and day out? A lot of job postings these days will actually say, the purpose of this job is this. Read that over, understand the posting. Once you've done that, then you can do this next part. This is an actual T analysis, and this is the paper that you've been given. On one side of your T analysis, it says job requirements, and the other side of the job T analysis is my qualifications. You'll notice it says technical skills, soft skills, and education. And what you're then doing is doing a side-by-side comparison between what the employer is asking for and what you have. The technical requirements for this particular job was the ability to use flowcharts, softwares like Visio, using Salesforce, eStart, Avaya. The other side used Visio to create flowcharts. I've experienced with Salesforce. That's my qualifications. The soft skills, looking for excellent written communication, presentation skills. What I have is I presented projects to a class of 150 individuals. The education, they want that degree in computer science. I have a degree in computer science. You're doing a side-by-side comparison. So this allows you to visualize what they want and what you have. What they want, what you have. Take the time to actually do this, because this is when I meet with a student, this is what I do in my brain. Is I don't need the paper anymore because I've done this enough times. So I do this in my brain saying, here's what they want, what do you got? Here's what they want, what do you got? And do that side-by-side comparison, because then we can understand, one, do you understand what the job actually is? And two, are you a good fit for it? And three, if you are, great, how do we tell it to them? So here's what we're going to do next. We're going to do a bit of a breakout room activity right now. Now, you have been given 3 job postings. You've been given a digital intern, arts and science. You've been given a business intelligence analyst, and that's for business and management. And you've been given a technical officer, that's for science. So you can be put into breakout rooms of about 4 to 5 individuals. And what I'd like you to do is this. In your group, pick one of these jobs. It doesn't matter which job it is, just pick one of these positions. You have one of them. And in your group, use the T analysis to break it down, okay? But the way you break it down is by answering 2 questions. Question number 1 I'd like you to answer is, what is this job about? Explain this in real language. What I mean is, how would you explain this job to someone who said, what is this digital intern? What is this job all about? How would you explain that to them? That's number 1. The second question I'd like you to answer is, who should be hired for it? So if you were the recruiter and you were recruiting for this job, what kind of person would you like? What kind of person would you want to hire? So again, in your groups, pick one person, pick one position, doesn't matter which of these you pick, and then answer those 2 questions. What is this job about? And who would you hire for it? We're going to give you about 10 minutes to work on this in your breakout rooms and have you come back. And then I would like to have 3 volunteers to talk about each one of these jobs. So I'm going to ask for someone in a group who talked about digital intern. I'll ask for a volunteer to talk about the business intelligence analyst. And I'll ask for a volunteer technical officer. And we'll have you explain what the position is. Okay. So you might want to pick a speaker in your group. Okay. Pick a speaker in your group. So Florence, can we do that breakout rooms? We'll do about 10 minutes for these. Okay.
Sure, sounds good.
Again, pick your job posting, pick your speaker, answer those 2 questions. Okay, I can see everybody's come back in, so great. Hope you had a chance to look at these job postings. So I want to take a couple of minutes just to review them. I want to introduce you to someone. My amazing colleague, Romeo, is monitoring the chats. So I'm going to ask for 3 volunteers. One group who worked on the digital intern, one group who worked on the business intelligence analyst, and one group who worked on the technical officer, to tell us what these jobs actually are about. Basically, go ahead and describe them, talk what they're about. So let's start with the digital intern position. So if someone would like to raise their hand, probably the best way to do that. And Romeo, if you could pick someone who's raised their hand to talk about the digital intern position,
Absolutely.
that'd be great.
Absolutely, we'd be happy to.
So digital intern.
So let's go with Arham.
Yeah, sure. So basically, my group talked about the digital intern position. So what we noticed was that it's like some probably keywords are like client manager, patient engagement, blogs, articles, reporting design, client updates, parsing data, analyzing results,
Mhm.
online marketing.
Fantastic.
And then in the job qualifications, it's obviously HTML and like
Mhm.
any one of those with the three like bullet points I have there.
Great. If you were to hire someone for this, who would you hire?
I would hire someone who has some experience in, let's say, like arts and design, and some like some technical knowledge, like HTML or some programming knowledge. And yeah, and who has like a portfolio maybe to showcase what their website or graphic design experience.
Ooh, bonus points for the portfolio. I'll be talking about those in a bit. Excellent point. Okay, thank you. All right, thank you so much. Let's look at the business intelligence analyst. Can I get a volunteer, please? Business intelligence analyst, please raise your hand. Romeo will pick you.
Let's take a peek. Looking for hands. Any volunteers? You can also respond in the chat if you'd prefer.
Anybody for business analyst?
Oh, we have Labib. Is
Yeah.
your hand up?
Yes.
Okay.
So
Go ahead.
our group was going through it, and one thing that we really realized was that this is a very client-facing role.
Mhm.
It's something that one of my other group members pointed out. It talks a lot about communication and presentation, so it does sound like it kind of has some elements of a consulting position. And it also, one thing we really took away from it was that it's very, one of the very emphasizes data, using data to provide insights, using data to help our clients create strategies that will help them meet their goals. And the other thing that we noticed about, because I know you were mentioning it's important to understand the organization. At the bottom of the job qualification sections, it says experience in media and advertising technology. So I'm assuming there's some sort of marketing firm that helps clients grab further outreach for their products and services.
That is an excellent point. You guys really nailed that one. So here's an excellent example of a job title that really doesn't tell you a lot of what the position is, right? Business intelligence analyst, like what does that actually mean? But what I like is how when you actually read the posting, you picked up that this job has a lot of consulting in it. That if you just simply read the qualifications, you think this is all technical, I'll be sitting in the back room doing Excel all day long. But then when you read it, it's like, no, I actually have to talk to people. I actually have to present these findings to individuals. I actually have to speak to stakeholders. And that's a key point, because maybe if you're the kind of individual that would love just a back-end position in which you just analyze things all day long and do number crunching, which is great, if that's what you like to do, then this may not be the job that you would find interesting, because you actually have to speak to people and present these numbers. So that's why it's so important to read the whole posting, because there's those little things in there where if I had two candidates in front of me, one, both of them are extremely, excellent at analyzation ability and very good on the technical level, but one had public speaking ability, which candidate do I go for? So think about that. Excellent point. Let's finish off with the technical officer. Hands up, who would like to talk about the technical officer? Romeo, please find me a hand.
All right. All right. This was one that our group had. So I'm hoping that I see a hand go up from there. Let's see. My friend Kane, I see a hand up.
Okay, please go ahead.
From the reading of the job description, it is very technical. It lists a lot of research technique that you're supposed to be able to do. And so I imagine it is a more of an entry-level laboratory position where you're doing a lot of basic tasks to support research. At the same time, I also read that there's a lot of communication skills required. When you mentioned the collaboration between NRC and UT, imagine that you have to present a lot of your results and findings. So there's the communication component as well as more of a technical component to the job.
Fantastic. Yes, thank you. Good job, everybody. And thank you so much for those who volunteered to speak. It's amazing what happens when you take a few moments just to read a posting, how much you can really get out from what the job is actually about. And maybe for some of you, when you're reading this position, you might think, you know what, I have some of these skills. I would actually have to apply them. All three of these jobs are found on CLNX. They were hiring for students. So these would be positions that all of you, if you're within that field and have the background and the desire to work for it, could apply to those jobs. So this is why it's important. Take your time, read the posting, because now that you get what they're looking for, you figure out what you have, Then we get to the next part of our presentation, which is how do you actually tell it to them? So that's what we're going to finish off our time together with, is understanding how to put together the resume, the actual formatting of it. When it comes to formatting in your resume, what I want to let you know is that resumes are much like art and technology, or I should say more like fashion and technology. What do I mean by resumes like fashion and technology? Well, much like fashion, everybody's got a personal opinion. There's going to be slightly different opinions in how you do certain things, how certain things look. Now, there's some fashion, for example, that I think people are hopefully universally agreeing on, such as having your jeans hanging below your bottom when you're wearing that. You know, back in the 90s when people did those things, we don't do the jeans below the bottom thing today. Hopefully we don't. We can all agree that, yeah, maybe that's not good. And with resumes, there are certain formatting components that almost everybody agrees on, but there are going to be certain tweaks that people like one thing over the other, or certain industries might prefer one style of resume over the other. So the reason I'm saying that is I'm going to do what I'm calling an umbrella covering of the formatting of the resume, which means I'm going to cover a lot about the resume, but very broad paint strokes in this case. For your specific resume, this is why it's important to meet with one of us, because we can get individual with you, because the way you write your resume might be different from that classmate. You might want to focus on something differently. So just please be aware that your resume might have certain specificities to it compared to someone else's. But I'm just doing broad strokes in this case. Now, the second thing about resumes is they're much like technology. And what I mean by that is it's always evolving. What was true about resumes 5 years ago is different today. And there's a couple of different things I'll be talking about that 5 years ago was standard and has changed today. So it's always very important to keep up on what resumes are like, what people are looking for. That's what I'm constantly doing. I'm always reading articles, I'm talking to recruiters, finding out what the latest trends are, and I try to present those to you, but it's not going to be 100%. So again, I'll do broad strokes, cover the best I can, but for your individual case, it's best to meet with us one-to-one so we can really go into that specifically for you. But let's do the overall coverage here. And what we're going to talk about is your contact information, your summary of skills or qualifications. We'll look at your education, your experiences, which would be employment or volunteer or anything such as that, maybe some extracurriculars, and we'll talk about references. So let's cover each of these sections. So let's first of all talk about your contact information. This is known as your header. This is the top part of what everybody sees. So what do we include here? Now we see here that I have Harry Tang as an example one. Now the one thing about header, this is the fashion component I was talking about. Harry Tang here is doing what we call a centralized header, in which means everything is centered. That's fine. A lot of individuals like to do what's called the left justified header, which means everything is to the left. That's how my personal resume is I have everything to the left. Which one's better? Neither. They're both great. So what you want to remember, though, is whatever kind of formatting you pick for your header, you want to try to keep that type of formatting for the rest of your resume, which means Harry's resume being a center justified name, all of his headers and everything that follows next should also be centered, just to keep a consistent formatting. But either left justified, center justified, both are fine. Now, you include your name. If you do have both your English name and the name from your home country, include both. Put one of them in brackets. The reason we recommend putting both on there, one of them in brackets, is you might go by your English name, but all your documentation has your home language name. And the reason you want to have both on there is so when the employer asks for documentation, they know it's the same person. Now, address. This is something that has changed. 5 years ago, you needed to have your complete mailing address on your resume. In fact, 5 years ago, if you said to me, you know, if you didn't have your address on your resume, I would say, well, why isn't your address on there? Why don't you want people to know where you live? Today, this is the latest trend. You don't have to include your address any longer in your resume. This has changed even before COVID. People were stopping to remove their address. Why? Well, two things have changed. Number one, you're commuting. Most employers, they know you're going to commute. They're not horribly concerned where you live. They understand that. But number two is even before COVID, a lot of jobs were starting to go virtual anyway. So home address is optional these days. You may or may not need to include it. But do have your phone number. Make sure it's up to date. Make sure it's accurate. And please update your voicemail and make it sound professional, okay? A professional email address. This is something that we do recommend. Now, what is professional email address? Harry's example here has his U of Toronto email address. That is optional. But here's one of those fashion things I was talking about. Some of my colleagues would say, use your University of Toronto email address after you graduate. That's fine. Me personally, I think once you graduate, use a different email address because you're not a student any longer. and that's fine. Which one do you pick? Whatever one you prefer. However, I do recommend that if you choose to use another email outside of University of Toronto, the two hot ones right now to be using is either Outlook or Gmail. Those are the two big ones to think about using if you want to use something other than U of T. When it comes to your email address, please make it professional, okay? Which means, and I'm 100% saying that with absolute honesty, I once saw on an email address hotlips32@hotmail.com. Yeah. Please make it your name. Try to make it your name. No numbers if you can. Now, my last name is Smith, so I've always had a difficult time trying to find it. I've used my middle initial sometimes. I had a student put their last name first and then their second name. That's an option too. Just your name. Okay, maybe a dot, middle initial, dot, last name. Just no hotlips32, please. Okay. Now, next, customized LinkedIn URL. This has also changed in the past 5 years. 5 years ago, a lot of people weren't putting the LinkedIn on the resume. Today, you need LinkedIn. One recruiter I was speaking to that says, if you don't have LinkedIn, you really don't exist today. You'll find out more about LinkedIn in a concurrent session if you want to go to that one tomorrow. So you can put a customized LinkedIn URL now on your resume. That is something else you could do. One of our students mentioned about websites and portfolios. If you're going into any kind of design or consulting, any kind of visual type of industry, a website or portfolio link is something I would recommend. And you want to do what's called a modified version if you have a second page on your resume, which means you don't have to do the full header. You can do a small version across the top. Now, you'll notice for Harry, his name is the largest thing here. So for your name on your resume, I typically recommend that you go 2 to 3 points larger than everything else. So let's say you're going for a 12-point font, go maybe 14 or 15 for your name. Just a little bit bigger. 18 is way too big. It takes like a 30-year page at that point. You know, just a few bullets hard. And I'll get to formatting in a little bit, but that top part. Now, the next section I want to talk to you about is known as the summary of qualifications. If you notice here, I do not talk about the objective statement here. Now, back when I was in university, which I won't talk about how long ago that was, an objective statement was standard. An objective statement has not been standard for over 10 to 15 years, I would say. No one uses them any longer. What we're using now is what is known as the highlights of qualifications section. So, understanding highlights qualification section is optional but recommended. So we do usually recommend this, except for certain industries. Again, this is that technology thing I was talking about of evolution. I've come across 2 industries lately in which the recruiters don't want to see a summary qualifications any longer. Those industries I've come across is the capital markets finance. From when I've spoken to recruiters and students in capital market finance, those recruiters don't care about your summary anymore. And I recently met a student who's going into actuary sciences, and they care more about the actual certifications they have, not their summary. So this is the research thing I was talking about, to research whether your industry is going into the trend of not having a summary. But I would say in over 90% of cases, you should include a summary of qualifications. Now, here's the thing about the summary. It is designed to show the relevant skills to the job. And I'll talk more about what the relevant skills mean. But remember, I was talking about reading the job posting first. This is where you need to understand what the skills actually are the employers are looking for. Because one type of job will want one skills, another type of job wants a different set of skills. And here's the thing to understand. It's not the skills themselves that are important, but it's how you use them in context that is important to the job. Here's what I mean. I have not seen most of your resumes yet. I might have seen a couple of yours. I'm not sure who's in the room today, but I've not seen most of your resumes. But I can tell you right now, for those of you who have a summary of qualifications, that in your qualification statement, you are a great communicator, a team player, well organized, analytical, but work well independently. Again, on your summary qualifications, you're probably a great communicator, team player, analytical, organized, and work well independently. How do I know that's on your resume if I've never seen it before? Because everybody says it. Almost 100% of resumes I look at, everybody's a great communicator. The science student, the English student, the business student, all are great communicators. And that's the concern that we see in summary qualifications, in which individuals just put skills on there, not understanding that everybody is saying the same skill. Remember the two problems I said you have to face is you're not the only candidate, you're not the only one that can do the job. Everybody has those skills, or at least they claim they do. So it's not the skill itself that matters. It's not the communication skill that's important, even though that's what they're asking for in the qualifications. I know they ask for that. It's how you use the skill in context that's important to the position. Remember, I used the example of research earlier on. It's not that you have research skills that's important, because everybody applying to that job will have them as well. It's how you use the research skills in context that is important to the position. It's that extra step that you need to take. And step one, of course, is understanding the position itself and understanding how those research skills are used, which basically means you're actually giving examples, okay? You're actually validating the skill. Instead of saying you just have communication skills, you're giving an example of where those skills were used. Remember I said you're not the only one that can do the job? This is where you can start differentiating yourself from the other candidates. It's how and where the skill was used, not that you used it. Yes, you have communication skills, and so does your classmate. But where you use those communication skills is different than them. So start to validate the skills, not that you have it, where it was used. When you're a recruiter, and again, when I used to scan through resumes very quickly, if a person put that little bit of extra effort in, I would tend to pause and read that resume a little bit more, because I wanted to see what they're actually saying. It was more than just the standard thing everybody else says. They're actually telling me, here's where I've done these skills before. If the position requires specific skills, so in this case, we give an example of valid driver's license, make sure you include that in your summary section. So I've seen that before. I had a student who was applying to a healthcare position, and in the job posting, it actually said, must have valid G-level driver's license. It actually said that because you'd be traveling to see people. So in that case, I said, make sure you have a valid driver's license in your summary section. So that's why it's important to read the job posting, to make sure that it's on there. Now, would you include a valid G driver's license on every summary? No, because if they're not asking for it, it doesn't matter. But if they are asking for it, make sure. And then when it comes to how to separate yourself from the others, make sure you customize this section. The summary of qualifications is the most customizable part of your resume. It is the part that should change depending upon which position you're applying to. You can take parts from the lower part of your resume, so let's say down at the bottom of the page, but it's important to the job, and move it into your summary section for them to see straight up. Because what you have to understand is this: now ATS has scanned the whole resume at once, so an ATS doesn't care where you put things. But as a human, we read top to bottom, top to bottom. That's how we read. And as a recruiter, that top third of your resume is where I'm starting to make decisions about whether or not I want to call you. So this summary is where you really want to bolster your strongest examples right up front for them to see. In fact, I usually recommend that your first 2 to 3 bullets of your summary is the job. Whatever the primary skills or experiences they're looking for, this is where you want to put it. The first 2 to 3 bullets. Right away, the recruiter reads it and goes, oh, you have exactly what I'm looking for. Excellent, excellent. Okay. Someone said, do you include the drivers because everybody might have it? Again, it's if they're asking for that specific skill set. Think of the word relevance in this section. What are the relevant things? I've seen students put CPR certification on there, and they're applying for an administrative assistant position. Okay, great, you have CPR, but what does it have to do with being able to use Excel? So this is when you have to think about what is the job about. Personalize it as well. This is where you want to add your touch to things. This is when you can actually show a little bit of personality yourself. And quantify. What do we mean by quantify? Instead of simply saying dealt with customers, how about spoke to approximately 60 customers per day? Instead of saying saved money for organization, saved approximately $50,000 for organization. Numbers speak. This is where you do differentiate yourself from someone else, is your experiences have their own quantifications. And by quantifying things, this is what makes you different. And we'll actually see what quantifications look like in a little bit. So here's the little thing for you. Based on the summary below, what is this person applying to? Okay, so I'm about to show you a summary section, okay? I'm about to show you a summary section. You do not know the job they're applying to. You do not know their program of study. They're a UTSC student. All you know is they're a UTSC student. You know nothing else about them. I'm going to show you a summary section. In the chat, tell me, what job are they applying to? That's all you got to do, is tell me the job they're applying to, okay? The top section says courageous mental health services advocate, approachable, thoughtful, team-oriented. Bullet number 1, proven ability to de-escalate crisis situations utilizing suicide intervention and prevention training acquired through volunteering at the Stress Center, Toronto. Provides supportive counseling and referrals to individuals with mental health issues. Exceptional problem-solving communication skills, including active listening. In the chat, what job are they applying to? Throw the title in. What do you think it is? Psychiatrist, what else? Throw the job titles in. Social work counselor, 911 emergency crisis. Fantastic. Peer support worker, crisis intervention. Okay, that's good. Thank you. You knew nothing about the position this person was applying to and read just the top section, and all of you got it right. This is a frontline crisis intervention individual. This is actually working with the homeless in a center, and you all figured it out. How did you know that? The language is clear and straightforward. Okay. Now, this Courageous Mental Health Services Associate, that's a title. And this is the latest trend in resumes, is actually titling your resume. I title when I was applying for jobs before, I would put the job title of whatever I was applying to there. So this is the latest trend where you can put some words about yourself and talk about your focus and goal on your resume. This is the latest trend you could do. But if you notice, the key words are in there. For me, a great summary is this. If I knew nothing about the individual, read their summary, I can tell you the job they're applying to. That's a summary. And that's what this is, and you all got it. Your summaries need to be this clear. Your summaries need to speak straightforward, because as a recruiter, you can look at this and say, boom, this person's a match. Now, let's say this person wasn't applying to work in a crisis center. Let's say this person was applying to be an office administrator. Does this summary make any sense? This person was applying to be a researcher. Now they're in psychology, but let's say a psychology researcher. Does this summary make sense? And in my personal opinion, no, it doesn't, because it doesn't reflect the skill sets for those jobs. Make sure when someone reads your summary, they get the position you're applying to. Let's talk about education. So education is a section you should be putting on there, but it's an issue of where do you put it. For most students, this typically goes right underneath your summary section. However, this section can change. So for example, on my resume, my education is the last thing I list. Why? Because I have experience. So once you start getting the experience in your position, this education section actually kind of goes further down, because employers like to see experience as well. But for most of you, you can put your education next. So what you want to do is go in reverse chronological order. Do not include high school. Okay, high school's done, over with. You completed it many years ago. We're talking university at this point. So we're talking your education. You could include the dates. If you're graduating this month or in June, you can say you're actually pretty much done. If you're still graduating a couple of years from now, put the date, put to present on there. If you're still graduating, at least a year out, put to present instead of the completion date. But if you're graduating the next month, you can put the date of now, because you're pretty much done. You can put some relevant courses if you like on there. So you'll see here that some relevant courses were put here, such as urbanization and development, land reform and development. So you can do that. Now, someone said, do you put your GPA on there? That's a great question. GPA and employers is a funny thing. You can include your GPA. We usually recommend is about a 3.5 or higher. You can put it on there. But please understand that a lot of employers aren't going to ask for it. Some do. I know some industries that do ask for the GPA, but a lot of employers aren't going to necessarily look at it. I had one student I met with this week ask me, should I put my GPA for years 1 and 2 and years 3 and 4 because I did better in years 3 and 4 than 1 and 2? And I looked at him and said, do you think the employer knows the difference between years 1 and 2 and 3 and 4? When's the last time they were in university? Does that translate to them? And the student's like, probably not. I said, so I probably wouldn't confuse them that way. So do you put your GPA? That's up to you. Some employers ask for it, some employers don't. If you're 3.5 or higher, go for it, but most organizations aren't going to ask for it. But do include your education on there. Next, work experience. So this is where it gets interesting, because some of you have actual paid work experience, some of you have done some volunteer work experience, and some of you have a combination of both, or projects or other things such as that. So this next section gets kind of interesting. I've had students who have, 1 or 2 jobs and 1 or 2 volunteer experiences. So we have what's called a relevant experience section, in which they put all those together. In fact, I have a sample resume I'll show you in a minute of what that actually looks like. But some of you have a lot of work experience, so you have a separate section, and a lot of you have a separate volunteer section. So this is going to be a case-by-case scenario of what sections do you do and how to include them, because each of you have different experiences. If you do a relevant experience section where you're combining both paid and volunteer together, just indicate what are the volunteer jobs by putting -volunteer beside it so the employer knows. Regardless if you're doing employment or volunteer experience, what you want to do is make sure that you write them both the same. You want to have about 3 to maximum 6 bullets for this section, okay? 3 to 6 bullets, no more than that. If you put more than 6 bullets, even 6 is a little high, they're not going to probably read that. It's too much for them. So this is where you need to be strategic in how you want to put your bullets on there. And what we want to do is what's called accomplishment statements. Let me read to you the first bullet here on this tour guide example that we have listed here. So we have an example of a tour guide, and it says, conducted informative 60-minute tours on of the campus to prospective students and their parents, providing information on the various services and programs. So this is what's known as an accomplishment statement. Do you notice that number 60, how it stands out a little bit? This is a quantification. Quantify things on your resume. The reason being is your eye jumps to numbers. When I used to do scanning, if there was a number on the resume, I'd always stop to read it because it looked different. But use the number. Now, if you can't remember exact numbers, the word approximately is a good friend of yours. Let's take a look at this. You want to create what's called an accomplishment statement on your resume. You want these both in your summary section, especially in your summary section, and for the first 1 to 2 bullets per experience. It has an action verb, the description, and then it has the results or purpose. And that makes a winning statement. What does that look like? Let's look at 2 examples here. You tell me as a recruiter which one you like. Met with clients and resolved concerns. This is a standard bullet I see from many students. Or managed 60 clients' questions and concerns by understanding their needs, researching alternatives, and providing solutions, resulting in accommodation from the manager. This is what you want. What you want is to have detailed information. Managed, that is your action verb. You want to make sure in most cases you're using past tense to begin your statements with. Now, the latest trend right now is in the past, all jobs, including current ones, were done in past tense. The latest trend is current jobs can be in current tense. I've seen that, and I've heard recruiters on both sides. So either one is fine. But if it's a previous job that you've completed, it's all past tense. Action verb with a quantification. Managed. Description. What did you actually do? Not only that you resolved the concerns, but what did you do in resolving the concerns? How did you do it? And the result. These are the things that help you stand out. Remember when I was talking about why should they call you? It's these types of statements will make you stand out compared to someone else. So we're running a little short, but let's try this out. I have 8 different very general statements here, okay? These are very general statements. Take a couple minutes. We're not doing this in a breakout room. We're going to do this on your own, okay? So just grab a piece of paper or whatever and pick 2. Pick 2 out of these 8. So we have maintained and cleaned lab supplies, recorded data, that's 2 of them. We have organized meetings, raised money for club events. We have taught English to children, made lesson plans, and then finally we have cleaned and maintained store and handled cash, gave change to customers. Pick 2. Make them an accomplishment statement. Now, we've helped you here. You have your action verb already at the beginning. If you notice that, all of them are an action verb, but expand it. So, for example, this English tutor one was this taught English to children. How many children? What grades? How did you teach them? Lab assistant, maintain and clean lab supplies. What lab was this for? How did you maintain it? What were you cleaning? Recorded data. How more general can you get? What was the data for? How was it used? Who was using it? Remember the who, what, where, why, and how. So I'm going to give you about a minute and take 2 of these and make them an accomplishment statement. Because I don't like silence, I got a bit of music for you. Okay. I'm going to ask for 2 volunteers to talk about one of them they did. Raise your hand. And Romeo, if you could find me someone who's raised their hand who would like to share an accomplishment statement.
I would be happy to.
So raise your hand if you'd like to share an accomplishment statement you created.
Let's see. We have one in the chat for the English tutor.
Okay.
If you want to start with that, so it's
That's good.
Serene, did you want to take yourself off mute and read the statement yourself?
Hi, sure. So I wasn't too sure about what's right for the result, so I made something up. So I said that taught English to like however many children you taught in whatever grades by making lesson plans that addresses writing skills or whatever skills that you're resulting in either like a 20% increase in their grades or maybe like increased interest in the subject. I'm not
No,
too
that's great.
sure
Actually,
about
that's
the other one.
no, that's fantastic. Actually, that's a great accomplishment statement. That done. I mean,
Okay.
obviously we would tweak it a little bit, but that look how much better that is, right? We have context. I got a picture of what you've done. Looks great. I see Nicole did one too. Nicole, you can unmute yourself there if you want to read yours.
Sure. I just wrote this one based off my own experience in several clubs. But usually when I'm talking about like organizing meetings, I try to be I shift it towards a leadership orientated kind of statement. And I try to include the number of meetings that were held, the people who were involved, and really try to utilize any of the mission or value statements from the club because that makes it more quantifiable.
Oh, it's fantastic. Good job. Thank you, Nicole. Appreciate that. That's it. We won't take any more, but appreciate that. What you have to remember is the employer knows nothing about you. All they know about you is what you've written to them. So these statements are designed to kind of, again, paint that picture of more of who you are and what you've done. And if you just simply said taught English to children, okay, I have a general idea what that means. But now that you've gone into more detail, shared a little bit more of the story, I'm getting to know you. And that is how you make yourself a little bit different compared to everybody else. Extracurricular activities. Can you talk about these? Sure. These would be something that you could include in your resume. Typically, these would go maybe in the bottom, but you can include these. These add some personality. A lot of employers these days are looking for holistic candidates. In fact, I know a recruiter personally who actually looks for these types of things on the resumes and starts his interviews that way. He likes to do that because it kind of gets them warmed up, feel kind of comfortable, and he likes to look for that. So some employers do like it. But if you're going to include extracurriculars, add a little bit more value to it. What were the skills you used? What were the accomplishments you did? Just again, to paint that picture for them. So again, this is an optional area that you could include on your resume. References. So references available upon request. This is optional at the bottom of the resume. I personally don't say you need it these days, so you don't have to put that, but definitely do not put your references on your resume. This is 20 years out of date. Although I did see a job posting this week that did ask for that, which I found very unusual. The job posting said, please include your references. Very unusual. I've never seen that before. But in most cases, do not include your references. It is standard procedure for employers these days to ask for them during the interview. So just make sure you got them ready, okay? Now, there's a lot of other sections here. I'm not going to go through all of these sections here, but there's a lot of other common sections you can include in your resume. And as I mentioned to you earlier, a lot of this will be dependent upon you. Some of these might be more relevant than others. So for example, we have one there that says publications. In the vast majority of cases, you're not going to include your publications on your resume unless maybe you go to a research job. Well, then maybe that's relevant to talk about your publications. But if you're going for an administrative assistant, they're not going to ask about your publications. So a lot of these different types of points that are on here may or may not be relevant. It is up to you. It is up to the job. And that's the question you have to ask yourself. If I want to talk about my computer skills or my certification, if I want to talk about my presentations or additional training, is it relevant to the job? And does it add value to me? Those are the two questions you need to ask yourself. Is it relevant? And does it add value? Now, in some cases, like the computer science students, you actually will have an entire section called computer skills because you know 20 different programming languages. So you're going to include all those. For those who are in the sciences, especially those who do lab research and who do anything like DNA sequencing, you might have an entire section called laboratory or technical skills because you know so much technical components. So that is very specific, where someone who, let's say an English student, doesn't have those technical skills, nor do they need them. So that's where you need to go, but case by case, job by job, what is relevant, what is not. Now let's talk about formatting. Now, as I mentioned, fashion. So some of the fashion thing goes into this, where this is the general guidelines for formatting, not the rules for formatting, okay? But here are the guidelines. You want to have an easy to read format. 10 to 12 points is what we usually recommend depending on the size of the font. Now, there's a lot of fonts out there. Times Roman numeral is the old standard one. You can still use Times Roman, but I've been noticing it falling out of style. Arial is really big. Calibri is really big, but there are many others out there. But you want to be that 10 to 12 depending on the size of font. So for example, a Calibri is about a 12 font you can go with. Arial's larger, so go down to the 11. So you need to be judging depending on it, but avoid using color. The reason you want to avoid using color is, Elin mentioned this yesterday, that ATS computer scanning system, sometimes you can't read color. So be careful, stick with black and white, if possible, if you're uploading your resume. Also, if you do other colors like red, for example, if the person prints it in a black and white paper, red comes out light gray. So what you want to do is stick with black and white if at all possible. Okay, white space, nice balance. You don't want to make it too crowded or too empty. Bold, italics, and underline. Be strategic, okay? Use bolds, use italicizes, but be strategic. I had a student who italicized their entire resume last week. I couldn't read it. So be strategic. Length, 1 to 2 pages. Avoid 1 and a bit. So this is a standard 1-page resume. This is off our website. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a moment, and I would like to blow this one up so you can see the bit. This is right off our website. So this is off our website. This is Amanda. You'll notice the dates are justified to the right. This is standard these days for right. This is the style they've chosen for a 1-page resume. Nicely easy to read. And depending upon your style, you might do 1 page, you might do 2 pages. We'll take a look at that. But this is right off the website. Gives you an idea how clean it is, how easy it is to read. This is what you want to be doing. Next, the standard resume is the most commonly used one. It can be customized, has some personality to it. Again, that 1 to 2 pages, avoid the 1 and a bit if possible. We can help you with that. These tend to be ATS friendly, so you can use them and usually the computer can read them. But since they're the most common one, they can get lost in the crowd. What do I mean by that? Last semester, I had 4 separate finance students applying to the same job. And I met each student one day. So like Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, I met each different student. The third student I met, I looked at her and said, "Have you and I met before?" She said, "No." I said, "Have I seen this resume before?" She said, "No." I said, "Because I swore I saw the same one yesterday." So the one thing you got to be careful of with this is I saw 4 resumes, all finance co-op students, different students, and they all looked exactly the same. So what you got to do is be careful with this and not use those templates. You want to customize this, personalize this, and quantify this. Avoid using templates if you can. Use a template as an inspiration, not as a copy and paste. Now, the creative resume. This is Marissa Mayer. She is the CEO of Yahoo. And boy, do you notice how different this one looks. She's breaking all the rules here. She has a picture on there. She's got colors. She's got a graph. She's using personalized language like my time. She talks about her kids on this thing. Very different. Very, very different. This is the creative style. Not used as often. It allows for great customization and personalization. It does visually stand out and is great for creative designers standing up positions. So if you're going to creativity, designing, consulting, these types of positions might want this. However, it is a niche resume. It is not appropriate for many, many, many positions. Understand that. And here's the biggest thing about the creative one. It is not ATS friendly. You put a creative resume through a computer scanning system, it will jumble it. I read an article once where a company did this as a demonstration where they put a creative resume through the ATS, and on the other side, it was a mess. The computer couldn't read it. Do not use these fancy column ones with graphics and all that. The computers can't read them. Use them only in a PDF format directly to the employer via email, if appropriate for the job. So for the vast majority of you, you won't be using this one. Some of you, you might be. Next steps. So we have a lot of resources for you, and this is where I'm going to close out. Go through a resume building tool. I'll show you what that looks like. We have resume resources. create a new resume and book an appointment with us. You can book an appointment, okay? Book the appointment and we can go through it with you. We have several different resources for you, and I just want to show you this and then I will be finished here. So we have lots of different resources for you. This is the Academic Advising and Career Center website. If you have not been here before, please visit us. You go to our start menu, hop down to careers and employment. We have a whole job seeking section. We have a whole lot of things here. But under job hunting tools, we have an entire resume and cover letter section. And I know I went through a lot today. I realize I fried a lot of your brains with all the information. To help you out, we have this resume building tool, which can take you through step by step on how to do a resume. Just hit the play button and it'll take you through step by step a lot of the things I spoke to you about today. We also have application samples. And this is where I was pulling out those application samples to show you. And we have them by field of study and by field of work. So please do check those out off our website. These are available to you to take a look.